continuing with the Israelites this morning in Numbers chapter 13. And as we have done in several of the previous lessons, we're also going to go back to some more history prior to what we're reading about in the lesson today. That I feel like it's pertinent to go back and it's a good time to talk about. So we'll start out in Numbers chapter 13. I think the book has us starting about halfway through the chapter, but I want to go through the entire chapter. So Numbers chapter 13, starting in verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders." So I wanted to stop here first and talk about just the ancestral tribes. So what are the ancestral tribes? Who are they? Yeah.
The sons of Israel, broken down into 12 tribes.
The sons of Israel broken down into 12 tribes. So what I wanted to take a moment here at the beginning of the lesson and pause and do is kind of go back and connect a few things. As I was reading through and studying through the lesson, the question popped into my head, and I kind of didn't really know the answer off the top of my head. After I looked at it, of course I remembered. But the question was, how did we go from God's promise to Abraham to now the Israelites being enslaved in Egypt and being freed from Egypt on this trek now to the promised land with Moses? So it starts out with Abraham, and then who's Abraham's son in the lineage of what we're talking about here? Went from Abraham to Isaac, and then who was next? Jacob. So Jacob was not the firstborn son. That was different than what we normally see in other lineages. That's one of my favorite lessons to teach. I think that was one of my first lessons I actually did on Sunday night, was Jacob and Esau and the bowl of stew. So Jacob, son of Isaac, son of Abraham, who God made the promise to, Jacob had 12 sons, and one of the 12 sons was the brother Jacob, and the 12 sons, or the other 11, despised their brother Joseph, I'm sorry. Yes, I wrote Jacob. It's Joseph. Jacob didn't have a son, Jacob. Joseph was the one that his brothers despised, and so what did they do with Joseph? Sold him in slavery. So where did he go? Egypt. He became a slave in Egypt. Ended up interpreting the king's dreams, becoming basically the king's right-hand man. And then what happened?
The famine came, and the rest of his family came to Egypt.
The famine came, and so the rest of his family came to get food. They didn't realize that Joseph was still alive. So they get there, and Joseph doesn't reveal himself at first. He sends them back to get his little brother. And so they bring back the little brother, and they end up bringing back his father as well. So this is what the 12 tribes are. The 12 tribes are the 12 sons of Jacob. Is who they represent. And that's what we're going to read through here in a minute in Numbers chapter 13. But before we do, I want to flip back to Exodus chapter 1. So last week we talked a little bit about Exodus chapter 2. I don't think I read from chapter 2. But we talked about the king wanting to kill all the firstborn. And then we talked about the birth of Moses and his sister Miriam, how she helped in keeping Moses alive. So I want to look at Exodus chapter 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. So those are Jacob's 12 sons. 11 of them traveled back to Egypt, and Joseph was already there. In verse 6, now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation had died. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. And then a new king, who did not know about Joseph, came into power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. And so they put slave masters over them to oppress them with with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. And so the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor and brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it is a boy, kill him, but if it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. And then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. And then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. And so that gets us up to where we talked about last week with Moses' birth, the history. I just kind of wanted to tie back from all the way from Abraham to his son Isaac to his son Jacob. And then Joseph, they sold into slavery to Egypt, became Pharaoh's right-hand man. Famine came, brought his whole family. They lived very well while Joseph and his brothers were still alive. And then after Joseph and his brothers died off, that was when the Israelites were a lot more in number. They started out as 70, and they were up to, I think, about 600,000 around this time, when the Israelites started putting them in slavery. And so that's where we are coming up into the life of Moses. So we'll flip back over now. Well, one of the things I want to mention here is we've talked in previous lessons about the Exodus from Egypt. God took the Israelites the longer way rather than the quick way out when we had that lesson. Why did God take the Israelites the longer way around?
More obstacles, more human obstacles.
Yeah, there's a quicker way. Yeah, there were trained armies. There was opposition, basically, if he took them the short route to the promised land. So what God did was take them the longer route, which was through the wilderness. And the book talks about the wilderness. It makes mention that when the Bible talks about wilderness, here it's not talking about wilderness like we think of it. I think that was a good point to bring up. It's not what I think of as wilderness, which is backwoods, forests, and going through trails in the forest and things like that. It was really more of a desert, kind of like a desert setting. It was very dry. So that's what the Israelites have been in for several years now, and that's where we're at in Numbers 13. So we'll continue now in Numbers 13, starting in verse 3. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites, and these are their names. From the tribe of Reuben, Shemua, son of Zakur. From the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, son of Hori. From the tribe of Judah, Caleb, son of Jephunneh. From the tribe of Issachar, Igal, son of Joseph. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hosea, son of Nun. From the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, son of Raphu. From the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, son of Sodai. From the tribe of Manasseh, which was a tribe of Joseph, Gadai, the son of Susai. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel, son of Gamali. From the tribe of Asher, Zethur, son of Michael. And from the tribe of Naphtali, Nabi, son of Bothai. From the tribe of Gad, Gual, son of Makai. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. And then Moses gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. So normally I wouldn't read through one of those big list of names like that, but I think it's important to point out those are of the 12 tribes of Egypt. And then the thing it points out there at the end is Joshua. So Moses gives Hoshea, and renames him to Joshua. What do we see later in Joshua? What is he famous for? So Joshua leads the people after Moses. We hear about the Battle of Jericho, right? There's actually a book in the Bible for Joshua. And so I think that's important to call out here that Joshua was son of Nun. And I already forgot which tribe I said he came from. Tribe of Ephraim. So of Jacob's son Ephraim is where Joshua came from. So then in verse 17, when Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and on to the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees on it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season for the first ripe grapes. And so they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rahab, toward Lebo-Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came through Hebron, where Ammon, Sheshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshal, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshal because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. At the end of the 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh and gave them the land. They reported to them in the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. When we went into the land which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along Jordan. And then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." So I want to start off and just kind of go back through the passage with some questions. So first of all, why did Moses send the spies out? What was the reason that he sent them out? To let them see the land. Yep. So they were sent out to spy the land to see what was there. Was it Moses' idea or somebody else's? God's idea. Verse 1. I thought that was a very interesting verse. I don't think I've ever seen that. Verse 1 is, the Lord said to Moses. And that's it.
Deuteronomy says that they came to Moses and asked to do that. And that's when it appears that God said, "Sure, send them out to see what I'm going to give them."
Right. So yeah, the book talks about that a little bit. Is that the Israelites did come to Moses first, but God did say to Moses, "Send the spies out." Moses didn't do it at the direction of the Israelites. He did it at the direction of God. So that's what I wanted to point out here in Numbers. So who did Moses send?
Top choice from every.
So the verse in the Bible says the leaders of the tribes, not just particular people. As it points out, he sends the leaders of the tribe. Why the leaders? I don't know that I know the answer. Just curious what your thoughts are. Why did he send the leaders of the tribe instead of just picking 12 random men or 15 random men to go out and be spies? Any thoughts?
Carrying more weight with the tribe.
Yeah, so trustworthiness, that was one of the things I had, is when they came back and told whatever was there, then their word as a leader of the tribe should carry more weight than someone from another tribe or someone else who's in a lower position. Also, it could just be because of their leadership qualities. You're sending somebody out as a spy, you're sending them out into an unknown area. You might not want to send some shy person that's not a good leader. You probably want to send somebody that is outgoing and will make it back. Any other thoughts on why he sent the leaders instead of anybody else? So Moses sent them out with specific instructions. He sent them with specific things to find out. And then so they went out, they went into the country, the promised land, and they came back. Some of them walked as far as 300 miles, which is probably an 8 to 12 day trip on foot, all the way up to Rehob. That was 8 to 12 days one way. It tells us the entire trip was 40 days long, which when I first read it, didn't understand why they do a whole 40-day journey, because it was 300 miles. As far as they traveled, it took them quite a while to get where they were going. So what did they find out? When they came back, what was their report? The land's what? Exactly what God said it was, right? It flowed with milk and honey was what the words they used. It was completely opposite of this dry, desert-like area, the wilderness that they've been traversing for all these years. The land that God promised them was exactly like they said. But there was a problem. What was the problem? There were some big guys there. There was opposition. Just like the same reason God didn't send them the short route. In the promised land, there was opposition. There were people there. Their walls were fortified. Their cities were well established. So the spies came back and basically didn't feel like they had a chance. They didn't feel like they could take the promised land. So it says they spread a bad report. And I think that was an interesting word to put there. It kind of leaves that open to speculation. So when it says they spread a bad report, does it mean that they just spread the bad things that they saw, or does it mean that they spread lies or exaggerations of what they saw?
Very possible they did lie.
Possible they lied. Anybody have any thoughts otherwise? So that was kind of when I read it, my first thought was when they said they spread a bad report, they probably spread either exaggerations, just over-exaggerated things, or all out lied about certain things. So again, they go into the land that they see is exactly what God had told them that it would be, exactly what God had told their forefathers that it would be all these years ago. And they come back, report all the good, and they say, oh, but there's a problem. And all of a sudden they think that they can't do it, just like they've done many times in the past. We've seen several times in the past where, oh, let's just go back to Egypt. It'll be so much easier there to be a slave. For some reason, they just cannot remember how God has brought them out of Egypt. They don't remember the 10 plagues that were in Egypt. They don't remember the Red Sea parting and then walking through on dry land. So there is one person who's the one that stands up and says, let's go do it. Caleb. Caleb's ready to go fight, right? Why is Caleb ready to go fight? Not because he wants to go fight.
Because God's on their side.
He says God's on their side, right? So Caleb knows. Caleb remembers the history. He remembers what all went on. And so he says, let's go do it. He's ready to go right now. He knows God could destroy the people of Canaan in the blink of an eye, just like what happened in the Red Sea. But just because he can doesn't mean that God's going to do it without any action on the part of the Israelites. So with the Red Sea, what did they have to do first before God collapsed the Red Sea on all the Egyptians? They had to go over by themselves, which meant what? They had to step out in what? In faith, right? Yeah, so they had to have faith to go through this river, through this sea that's just split with a big wall of water on either side of them. They had to have the faith to walk through that on their own before God took out the Egyptian army behind them. There are so many other ways God could have handled that. God could have just completely destroyed the armies. God could have made it to where the armies didn't even come after them. But God required an action on the part of the Israelites. So for me, that was the main takeaway for this lesson, is that God includes his people in his plans. God requires action on the part of his people. He expects faith from us, but he also wants to make sure that we're prepared for what is to come. So this reminded me of a lesson I did a few years ago on David and Goliath, and I wanted to kind of go back through that one as well. It kind of has the same theme about stepping out in faith and being prepared. So the story of David and Goliath, I won't go through it and read it, but it's in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Normally we think of the story of David and Goliath as David is an underdog. He's a kid, and Goliath is a warrior. David's a shepherd, Goliath's a trained fighter. And Goliath is suited in armor with all his modern weaponry. He's got a sword, a javelin, he's got a spear, all this armor, and all David has is what? A sling, right? So in ancient warfare, there are three types of warriors. There's the cavalry, which are the men on horseback with chariots. There's the heavy infantry, which are the armed foot soldiers that have the swords and the shield and the armor. And then there's the artillery, which are the archery, or the slingers, the ones who have slingshots. Now, slingers had a leather pouch with two long cords attached to it, and they would put some kind of projectile or rock or whatever in the pouch, and they'd whirl it around and let one of the cords go and project the stone forward toward its target. So that's what David had. David had this slingshot, basically. It's really important to understand that it's not the slingshot that I think of when I think of a slingshot, which is what I had as a kid, and you pull it back and do that. I don't think that's going to kill a big giant. It might hurt him, but it's not going to kill him. So the slinger whirls this sling probably 6 or 7 times per second, and by the time it releases the rock or whatever object's inside, it's going really, really fast. It's probably going about 80 miles an hour or more. So on top of that, the place that they were, where this battle happened between David and Goliath, where they were in the Elah Valley. And the stones in the Elah Valley were made of barium sulfate, which is probably twice the density of normal rocks. So the ballistic power of barium sulfate is roughly equal to the ballistic power of ammunition in a 45 millimeter handgun. We know from historical records that experienced slingers could hit or kill a target at distances of up to 200 yards. Two ball fields away, a slinger could sit there and do this and shoot and hit a target 2 ball fields away. So now we've got this experienced shepherd, who again we normally think of as the underdog, with this devastating weapon. And then here's a lumbering giant, he's weighed down with all this armor, hundreds of pounds of armor, he got all these weapons on him, huge for hand-to-hand combat. So Goliath is sitting there, and David goes into this knowing what? The same thing that Caleb said. God's on his side, right? So David walks up to him. He offers to go up to him, not because he wants to fight him, but because he knows God's on his side. And so when David goes up to him, he knows he's going to be standing there within close range of this big giant. And so even though he knows he's got a weapon that he can kill this giant with, he also knows that he's got to do it fast enough, he's got to be accurate enough, he can't be scared, but he does have experience. He's prepared. So at that point, Goliath is basically a sitting duck if David can sit there and get his nerves away. He can focus on what he's there to do. So when Goliath steps out there and he says, "Come to me," it's because that's the only way he knows how to fight. Goliath can't fight him from far away. He can only fight him with an arm's distance, with a sword distance. So in the passage of 1 Samuel 17, one of the things that Goliath says is, "Come to me." He wants David to come fight like a trained soldier would fight with a sword, shield, and armor. His strength is in hand-to-hand combat. And so this is where, in his position, the Goliath, his strength proves to be his biggest weakness. He's not ready to fight someone who can knock you down from 200 yards away. So back to the lesson we talked about with the Israelites. In this case, it seemed like David was the underdog. It seems like David didn't stand a chance. He's this little bitty boy. He doesn't have armor. He's going to stand really close to this big giant. But God has a plan. He knows God has a plan for him. It was the same thing with the Israelites. They see these big cities that have all these fortified walls. They have these big armies. They see all these things that normally would be in their way, but what they keep forgetting is that they have God on their side. God wants them to be prepared. He's He's not just gonna take these cities out and just blow them away with a big meteor or something like that, which he could do. But he does want action on their part. He does want them to have faith, to understand that he can do this through them, and not just on his own. That's the lesson that I have for today. Does anybody have any thoughts to add to that? Anything else that we could talk about on the passage?
I was just wondering today how that land was used as like a parade, is this everything we care, have it, or was that God, a miracle of God?
How what?
Was that a miracle that that land produced so much that it flowed with milk and honey in those days as compared to the nuts and days?
I don't think so. John or Scott, what are your thoughts?
I think it was the location, because it was right there on the border where it actually had water,
Right.
where the rest of the wilderness had, it didn't have that access to the water.
John, looking at it from today's standpoint, it doesn't look like a land that you would want to buy.
But the thing is, you need to understand, even all through Israel's history, God gave the rains and the things it took to make it what it was, and he withdrew it and everything back and forth, depending upon their service to him and their faithfulness in him, or whatever. And so it's very likely that he's the one that allowed it to produce so that his people could move into it and do those things. Because later on, he took away the rains, he took away that, and they could starve in all those situations. And today, his people aren't there. It's not, he's not blessing the place because that's not where his people are, and they're not faithful to him and all those things. So it may have been the opportunities are there, but only when God allows it to take place.
Good explanation. Any other thoughts on today's lessons? God, would you care to close us in with prayer?
Lord, we thank you for the day that you've given us and our blessings. We thank you for the opportunity to study your word. Guide us, be with us, bless us. In your son's name, amen.
Yeah.